By adopting the I Heart Rose Park logo, the Westside Leadership Institute team seeks to foster community pride in order to increase civic engagement and awareness of city resources among residents.
Um, I love inviting anybody from in Salt Lake and around to come to Rose Park and see what it's really like and see the diversity and see our awesome streets and get to know our neighbors and get to know our neighborhood because it is a treasure in Utah and the whole state.
We see neighbors identifying problems in their communities and collaborating to find realistic ways to address these issues. We see a Rose Park that celebrates its identity.
Rally your neighbors around an issue, and a lot of times issues are community issues, so it's important to get the people that it affects involved and rally behind the issue. I feel like my perception has totally changed as far as leadership in the area, from a title to more of action. Leadership is what you do, and not a title doesn't make you a leader.
By compiling, creating, and distributing a directory of community resources, we hope to foster connections between Rose Park residents and community groups.
There are so many issues that I'm passionate about and hope to use these skills to really make a difference.
Our team is interested in a lot of different aspects of the river, but right now we're trying to focus primarily on setting up a youth program on the Jordan River that involves the kids in basically engaging the space over time in a lot of different ways to foster a connection to that space and ownership. And one of the main principles behind that is that, when you create traffic in a space, you drive down some of the negative behaviors that happen on the parkway.
I fell in love with it, and this is where we've been doing our reading. So then the interest about cleaning the place. So while riding, carrying a bag with my children, we start picking up. We just did it like that, something just naturally that we gotta take care of it.
The concept of leadership being an action was really, it changed my perspective a lot. That maybe in our culture we think of authority figures as the ones who are leading, and it's not true. The individual that sees a need has a vision of what could be the action that they take. They're being the leader. Thought of this concept of what if every time we meet we just go to the river and do something to maybe just demonstrate our vision of what we want. It's not anything super significant, picking up some trash, but it's not in an office disconnected from this space that we want to change. So,
and what I want to see with this place, I would like to see this place being used properly, less vandalized, maybe flowers around it, more, lighting, so it could be used for, like what we have talked before, more people, more welcoming, picnic tables.
Looking at our project now, I find people like Gilberto are pretty much the most important aspect of community work, because I come from the office. I'm like, okay, well, you need to start these programs and then go out there and get these kids that are interested, and that's a lot harder than you would think.
Maybe people heard me out there and said, let's Give this crazy guy a chance. You know, that's what I think. Which is good for me because I really, even if I didn't have the support from anybody, if you guys didn't jump in and say, okay, let's do something, I would still be out here. I'll be out here with my son and my grandson, and start with my family. That infects my next door neighbor, and then I bring in my soccer club. After the registration, we go out there and clean up. That's how we've done it.
What do you think are the biggest challenges the PI community faces these days?
Besides, I would say the identity crisis, I think the lack or the loss of language and traditional cultural protocol. I had the opportunity to join the National Tongan American Society Board of Directors. I jumped on the opportunity because I realized that there had to be other people like me that were having identity crisis. I would identify with the second and third generation kids.
Right.
That I understand not knowing the culture, not knowing the language, and how to still be Polynesian,
Right.
and be okay to be my own kind of Polynesian.
So what do you think young or older Pacific Islanders growing up or living here in the U.S. need to know in order to be successful?
I think they need to learn to compromise with each other. I think to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and honor and respect each other.
Right. So is anyone you know working on these problems?
I think there are a couple of groups that are. I think that eventually all Pacific Island community organizations and churches will eventually get to that point that they realize there's a huge generational gap, cultural generational gap there, and that I think all of us will start working more in that vein.
Poly Movement was created through WLI, and our project is about addressing the generational gap in the Pacific Islander community. And from that, we felt that it stemmed to different issues because there's a lack of language and the cultural traditions, learning American versus what they have to live at home if they're Samoan or Tongan or whatever it be. And we wanted to energize the community, the Pacific Islander community, by making a series of public service announcement videos that uses humor, culture, to address all the different issues due to the generational gap within the PI community. So,
what did you learn in the WLI?
I think the one thing that stood out to me was learning to energize the community. I always just thought it was the organizations who provided everything. I never thought of it as the people getting themselves involved to help themselves so they can, be sustained. But looking at it now after the class, I understand now their job is not to make the changes for them, it's for us to help them help themselves.
Mental health is something that affects each one of us in different ways.
Alienation that we do to ourselves, discrimination, stigma. There's always a judgment of moral character because the symptoms of a mental illness, it has a lot to do with your behavior and the way you relate to others.
To address the mental health needs of Utah's Latino community, concerned parents and individuals in recovery, then students of the Westside Leadership Institute, teamed up to form a task force under NAMI Utah, the state's chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
So we began doing support groups, classes, family support groups, public presentations, responding to all the characteristics of the culture.
When people have the opportunity to contribute, to be part of the solution, rather than seen as the problem, people will flourish and people will help find those solutions.
Leticia has a child, a son, who is 17 years old with autism. She says that he is one of the things that motivated her most to be here. Leticia explains that the first thing she learned is how to be a better leader, how to have sympathy and understanding for people in the community. Margarita learned, or understood rather, that depression is a mental illness. She says this illuminated her relationship with her daughter as a person with depression and taught her how to treat her daughter.
Unfortunately, even with the hard work of women like Leticia and Margarita, the needs of the community are not being met.
Still, we're not at the point that we can offer or are being able to offer things like assessment, diagnosis, and treatment.
In advocating for a more complete treatment of behavioral health, the task force formed an organization called Latino Behavioral Health Services. By partnering with existing agencies, this organization hopes to bring diagnosis, treatment, information, and intervention for substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental illness to everyone in the community.
Latino Behavioral Health Services is an effort from the community to build its own structure, its own organization base, so people can take turns, so there is a body that exists and survives all the waves that people may have in their lives. The solutions are within the people.
It's almost like throwing a rock in a lake and then you can't stop the ripples.